Thank you all for your practice. Okay, so for the last 2.5 months, 3 months, I'm not even sure at this point, I've been doing a series of talks on the Satipatthana Sutta. The Satipatthana is the Buddha's discourse on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we've gone over each foundation, and right now we're on the 4th foundation, and the 4th foundation is where you find a lot of the lists in this practice. In Theravada Buddhism, they call us list worshippers because there's so many lists. So when we get into the 4th foundation, that's where we find the Eightfold Path, the 7 Factors of Awakening, the 4 Noble Truths, the 6 sense spheres, the 5 aggregates, the 5 hindrances. And I've been doing a series of talks on the 5 hindrances, and tonight we're on the 5th hindrance, which is the hindrance of doubt. And these are generally referred to as hindrances to our meditation practice, but what they really are is just hindrances to our mental health in general. And so these 5 hindrances are craving, aversion, lethargy, restlessness, and then finally doubt. And like it or not, they're going to show up, right? They're going to show up for all of us. It is the natural human tendency to crave things, to be averse to things, to be a little lethargic at times, to be a little anxious at times, and to have some doubt. And that's okay. Like, don't worry about that. It's perfectly cool because they still showed up for the Buddha too. He showed up in the form of what is known as Mara, or the evil one. And he's kind of like the Buddhist devil, basically, is what he is. And what he really was like the personification of the Buddha's own mind. So before the Buddha became the Buddha, he was a man named Siddhartha Gautama. And when he set about for his awakening after many years of trying different practices that didn't quite get him where he thought he could get to, he sat under the Bodhi tree, and we all kind of know the story. And if you don't, I'll tell it sometime. But as when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree before he reached his awakening, he kind of had to face Mara. And Mara showed up in a few different ways. The first way that Mara showed up was Mara sent his daughters in the form of sexy ladies trying to tempt the Buddha with lustful thoughts. And rather than be tempted, the Buddha simply said, "I see you, Mara." So he didn't fight Mara, he just acknowledged that he was there. The second way in which he showed up is Mara sent his army of demons to fight the Buddha. And again, he just simply said, "I see you, Mara." The third way was appealing to the Buddha's own sense of inadequacy and self-doubt. And basically what he did, he was like, who do you think you are? You'll never awaken. You will never attain awakening. This meditation thing is a dead end. It's not going to get you anywhere. And even if you did awaken, there is no one here to witness it, and no one will believe you. And so he put his hand on the ground and said, the earth will be my witness. And at that point, as the story goes, he had the first of a series of awakenings over the course of the next few weeks, basically. And that wasn't the last time that Mara showed up for the Buddha. Mara showed up throughout the Buddha's life. Even on the Buddha's deathbed, Mara showed up to him. So these hindrances of the Buddha's mind showed up for him throughout his life. These are things that are inescapable. We're going to experience all of these things. And there's a high probability that we're all going to experience some doubt. For me, I feel like doubt is the most insidious of all of the hindrances because it can stop us before we even start. And it can also give rise to some other of the hindrances. Doubt can show up as lethargy, kind of waffling on a decision. It can show up as anxiousness when we're worried about the outcome of things. And there's 2 types of doubt. There's skeptical doubt, which is what we're really going to talk about tonight, and then uncertainty. But in regards to the practice, I want to focus on skeptical doubt. And so I'd like to talk about what the Buddha had to say about doubt, offer some personal reflections on it, and offer some practical approaches to working with doubt as far as this practice is concerned, at least. And as you've undoubtedly heard me talk about over the past few weeks, if you were here, the Buddha liked to teach in metaphors and similes. This is one of the ways that he taught. He was really good at tailoring his teachings to the particular person in which he was teaching to. And so with the hindrances, the Buddha used the simile of a bowl of clear water. And so I'll go over each of these hindrances and explain how the Buddha used this simile. For craving, he used the simile of the bowl and the water being dyed with beautiful dyes, right? So though it's alluring, it prevents us from seeing our reflection clearly in the water, so we don't have any clear discernment. With aversion, he likened the bowl to being heated over flame so that it was boiling, and the volatile nature of the bubbling of the water prevents us from, again, seeing clearly. With lethargy, he used the analogy of the bowl being covered with algae or water plants. So the stagnation creates this surface in which we can't see clearly. For anxiety, or what it's really is restlessness and doubt, or restlessness and worry, he used the analogy of the bowl being swept by the wind, so that the agitation of the water prevents us, again, from seeing clearly. And with doubt, he said that the bowl was filled with mud. So it's like being filled with mud and set in the dark. So that prevents us from seeing our reflection. It prevents us from seeing things as they truly are. And I totally get that, right? Because like the doubtful mind makes it impossible to see things as they are. And if you're new to this practice, I think it's natural to have some questions. Even if you're not new to this practice, I feel like it's still natural to have some doubts and be a little skeptical as to the validity of what we're doing here and the efficacy of this practice and this path. And doubt isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's this Zen saying, big doubt, big awakening. Little doubt, little awakening. No doubt, no awakening. And so if you've got some doubts, great, perfect, wonderful. It'll be useful in your practice. Because this is it's a practice of investigation and curiosity, which leads to insight, and ultimately, with diligence through practice, can lead to nibbana, or enlightenment, awakening, whatever you'd like to call it. So there's three ways in which doubt can show up in this practice. That can be doubt in the teachings. You might have the question, are these teachings valid? Do the 2,600-year-old teachings of the Buddha apply to my life now? And, well, yeah, absolutely. 100%. The Buddha was a human being, and surprise, surprise, he experienced a lot of the same things we experience now. Again, craving. Anybody here crave things? Yeah, right? Aversion. Anybody here averse to some things? Not like certain things? Right. How about lethargy? Anybody get a little lethargic from time to time? No. How about anxiousness? Anybody ever experience anxiety? None of you fine people have ever experienced anxiety, I'm sure. And doubt. Anybody have doubt? Doubt in the practice, doubt in yourself. I feel like we all experience a healthy amount of doubt. So yeah, this is the human condition, and the Buddha, in all of his wisdom, didn't start with awakening. He started with the truth of suffering in the Four Noble Truths. And that is that we're all going through it. In his first discourse, which is this very long word, which pretty much translates to the turning of the wheel of Dharma. The Pali term for that is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which is a fun one to say, and even more fun one to try to spell. This is where we're introduced to the Four Noble Truths, and we're introduced to the truth of suffering. And the Buddha said that birth is dukkha. Dukkha is generally translated as suffering, but what it really means is difficult, empty. And that's kind of been my experience with a good chunk of life. Not all of it, but a good chunk. That birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha, not getting what we want is dukkha, getting what we don't want is dukkha, losing people dear to us is dukkha, being around people we don't necessarily care for is also dukkha. So there's all these ways that we suffer just being born into this human birth. And The acknowledgement is that we have all experienced a lot of these things. We're all going to experience all of these things, and that everybody is experiencing these things. So these themes are very relevant still. Nothing has really changed in 2,600 years. And that's kind of cool, right? 2,600 years, that's a long time for this tradition to be around. It's 2,600 years and people are still practicing this practice, which that gives me a hell of a lot of faith, quite honestly. In Buddhism, faith, or sada is the Pali term for faith. It doesn't necessarily mean like a blind faith. It means something more like confidence. And so 2,600 years gives me a lot of confidence in this practice. And it's a confidence for me that came from my own direct experience. And that should really be the only way in which we know anything to be true, is through our own direct experience. And the Buddha was very clear about that. In the Kalama Sutta, where he was addressing the Kalama people, he said, "Do not go upon what has been acquired by repeated hearing, nor upon tradition, nor upon rumor, nor upon what is in a scripture, nor upon surmise, nor upon an axiom, nor upon specious reasoning, nor upon a bias towards a notion that has been pondered over, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon the consideration, the monk is our teacher. When you yourselves know these things are good, these things are not blamable, these things are praised by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to benefit and happiness. Enter on and abide in them." So it's with our own experience that we really gain true insight. We can listen to Dharma talks and we can read the suttas and their commentaries and do all that, but it's really through the practice and our own experience that we really can be sure of anything. There's a Pali word, ehipassiko, and what it means is come and see. See for yourself. And so the encouragement is for you to see for yourself. It's to do that through the practice. And, there may be some doubt when you first start with this practice. And as I said earlier, there may be some doubt even if you're neck deep in this practice. I still have doubts sometimes. Some of the doubts in the practice can be, can the practice actually be beneficial to my life? Will it work for me? And again, you have to see for yourself, but it works for me. This practice has effectively changed every single part of my life, for the better, in case I was being unclear. And I came to this practice at like the worst time in my life. I actually came to this practice while I was in jail. I was doing a year in jail for a drug charge. I was addicted to heroin for many years. Before that, I was a pretty heavy drinker. And just one day I was in jail and I didn't really have anything to do, and I was looking for a book to read, and there happened to be a book on a bookshelf called We're All Doing Time. And it was written by a man named Bo Lozoff, and he was part of the prison ashram project that was started by Ram Dass. So thanks, Ram Dass, for changing my life. But it gave some basic yoga asanas and some mindfulness and breathing practices, and it said treat this time while you're incarcerated like it's your ashram, like it's your monastery. And so that's what I did. And I just started sitting, and 5 minutes turned into 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes turned into 20, and then 20 turned into an hour, and then before I knew it, I was sitting for hours a day and just avoiding all of the other stuff that jail has to offer, because it has a lot of other stuff to offer that I didn't really want a part of at the time. And at first I just was doing the meditation thing, and I didn't really know too much about the Dharma. I didn't know too much about Buddhism. It wasn't until a few years later that I really got involved with the practice. But yeah, it's changed my life 100%. And I had been clinically depressed for the better part of my life. So in response to that depression, I self-medicated, and that's kind of why I was doing what I was doing. But it was through this practice that I was finally actually able to learn some real coping skills and learn some ways to actually help myself. Because avoiding my problems through substance use only created more problems. The funny thing about drugs is they do work in the moment, but there's a lot of collateral damage that comes with that. It's like getting a credit card with like a 90% APR rating. It's right. Like you can get the TV now, but you're going to pay out the ass for it in the long run. This, like I said, this practice taught me some coping skills. So when the shit hits the fan, which it invariably always does, now I don't reach for a drink or a drug. Now I'm able to sit with whatever happens and be with it in a skillful way. And that's nice, right? Like it's nice living a life that isn't clouded with drugs and alcohol. There's so much beauty to be found in just participating in the human experience that you miss out on when you're self-medicating. There's so much beauty to be found when we're not trying to dilute our experience or change it to something that would be seemingly more palatable in the moment. Stopping and smelling the flowers, quite literally. It's a beautiful thing. Sharing time with good friends, that's a beautiful thing. Sharing time with good friends and having good conversation, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Another way that you might have some doubts is doubt in your ability to do the practice. Sensei Seven Ross, who's a Zen teacher, says, "Great faith and great doubt are two ends of a spiritual walking stick. We grip one end with the grasp given to us by our great determination. We poke into the underbrush in the dark on our spiritual journey. This act is real spiritual practice, gripping the faith end and poking ahead with the doubt end of the stick. If we have no faith, we have no doubt. If we have no determination, we never pick up the stick in the first place." And this practice really only asks us to do a few things. It asks us to practice radical, indiscriminate kindness. It asks us to follow the Eightfold Path. And it asks us to intimately know the Four Noble Truths. It asks us to investigate our experience. Again, these Four Noble Truths aren't capital T truths, things to know. They're more meditations. They're things to experience for ourselves. Have you ever noticed how hard it is just to be you? Have you ever noticed how difficult it is just to be a human being? And how difficult the human experience is? And have you noticed that when you don't cling or become attached to things, that you tend to suffer a little less? Weirdest thing. Again, like I said earlier, everybody's going through it. We're all experiencing sickness, aging, death. We will experience death. We're all gonna get shit we don't want. We're not gonna get all the things we do want. We're gonna lose the people we love the most. We're gonna have to be around people we don't necessarily care for. And I think that alone is enough reason to just act with this radical kindness, right? And to just care for each other just a little bit more. And if you're looking to make positive changes in your life, again, I can only speak from my own experience, but it has been working for me for many years now. At one point, at the height of my addiction, I was homeless in New Orleans and shooting dope with puddle water. And now I'm not, right? And I really owe that to this practice. I can't stress that enough, that this practice saved my life. And I'm not perfect, but I can tell you I'm a hell of a lot better than I used to be. And my mental health has improved dramatically, and my life has improved 100%. It's 100% different than it was. And when I really reflect on it, I can see ways that it has progressively improved since I began practicing. So if you do have any doubts whether you can do this practice, yeah, you got this. You can for sure do this. If I can do it, you can do it. There's really nothing to it. Yeah. And if you train the mind in the way which the Buddha instructed us to train the mind, you will see a change in your life. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. So don't give up before the magic happens. Bhikkhu Bodhi said that liberation is the inevitable fruit of the path. It is bound to blossom forth when there is steady and persistent practice. The only requirements for reaching the final goal are two: to start and to continue. So if you haven't started on this path and you'd like to see your life improve in every possible way, ehe pasako, come and see. And if you have started on the path, just keep going. Like Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So the only thing that it requires is to start and continue. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or 5 minutes of meditation. There's some antidotes that the Buddha offered in regards to doubt. The most simple and effective way to clear up doubt is to just ask questions. Ask somebody who's been involved with the practice in a while. Read books, surf the internet, read the commentaries. Another way that he said could dispel some doubt is just by talking with noble friends and having noble conversations. There's this word, kalyanamita, which means spiritual friends. And you all are here in this room. You are sitting in this group. So you are now a part of my Sangha, and you are all my friends. So I'm going to call you and invite you out to coffee and harass you, and we'll get to know each other. Just look at the doubt that you carry around with you and find out where the doubt is in your life and see how it's affecting your life and holding you back. Don't see doubt as a negative thing. See it as an opportunity to practice. Because if you take on this practice, you will see a change. And I love you. Keep going. Right?